Harmonia, thank you for agreeing to meet us. We're in Boston, and we're in what I believe was originally the oldest Church of England church in America. Initially a wooden building dating from 1686, and then later built as a stone church, which is what we're now in, which I think was completed in the 1750s. And it later became a Unitarian church, so it stopped being an Anglican church. So it's drenched in history, and a very significant part of that history is that for a long period of time, this was a place where both the owners of enslaved people and enslaved people themselves worshipped in the same building but separately. And we're actually sitting in the gallery spaces where enslaved people would have been required to sit, segregated from the rest of the congregation. So it's a place with a difficult history, as well as a place that we might be impressed by because of its great age. And here in this contested space, the current congregation want to do something that comes to terms more fully with that difficult history. There are 219 named enslaved persons who we know about who worshipped here, but no doubt many, many more whose names we'll never know. And as part of addressing that history and maybe suggesting ways in which an appropriate kind of reckoning with it can come about, you have been commissioned to make an extraordinary pair of works of art, haven't you?
Well, it's a sculpture and a ceiling mural. And when the first time I was approached, it was kind of like, well, knowing the history, now that we've walked you through, like, what do you see? They gave me this freedom of what to create on how I feel. And to an artist, that means a lot, because now I'm free to create what I want. And I was like, I feel like a sculpture needs to be in place because it can be outside and to the public, which is very important to me. So I thought about sculpting a woman that's not particularly a woman, anybody we know, but she embodies freedom. And I want her to exude this strength, this confidence, and she is holding an empty cage, and she is opening the empty cage and letting the last bird free. And I chose sparrows and robins that represent renewal and change. So that's that embodiment. And I want it to be in conversation with the mural inside. So what I did is the mural, when you're sitting up here and understanding what the ones who were up here were looking at and they couldn't engage with the congregation below, I was thinking that this was a cage. So let's lift and open it up. So the ceiling was going to be a sky. And now you have the ones that were up here in historical garb looking down and communicating with the congregation below in a way where it's natural. You know, maybe one's talking to another, one's looking down, pointing, you know, just really engaging and becoming a part of everyone who is here. And in the center, in the sky, you're going to have the rest of these sparrows, which will equal 219, if you count the ones on the statue as well, flying up and being released into, or ascending into the sky.
That's very powerful. And the way in which the sculpture kind of has its continuation inside the building, and the way in which you're kind of channeling quite an old tradition of suggesting the heavens, you know, in the church ceiling, but giving this a new dynamism and also a very specific and important political relevance. Not an escapist vision of heaven, but one in which is very directly indexed to the history of this place and the work that is yet to be done, I guess, to achieve those freedoms.
And what I wanted to do is really, especially with the style of the statue, the importance to me was for it to look like it has always been here. Like has always been a part of the architecture, the art that's already present here, that it's always belonged.
I can't wait to come back to Boston and see these in maybe a year or so's time. But I want to broaden the conversation out a little bit and think about your wider body of work, which has led to this commission. And because I really admire it. And as you know, a lot of what we do in the project that I direct in London is think about the multiple ways in which the biblical text particularly has played through Western art and continues to play through it even today in the work of contemporary artists. Now, it isn't only the Jewish or Christian textual tradition and artistic tradition that you draw on. You use Greek classical myths, and you also have a very lively interest in religious traditions from West Africa, some of which were importantly mediated through Cuba, and you are of Afro-Cuban descent, so both of those, that confluence of traditions is something that's very personal for you. And it reminded me of my childhood. So it was one of my favourite books when I was a child. It's called Gods, Men and Monsters. And it's the Greek myths. And it was one of a series of books which introduce you to the religions of different historical periods and places. And so there were the Greeks, and then there were the Norse ones, the Viking gods, and there was something about the Celtic gods, and there was something about the Indian gods and the Russian. And since I've encountered your work, I've realised there's an important missing volume, at least one important missing volume here.
Absolutely.
Tell me what's missing from this series, because I think it's absolutely crucial.
Yes, it's the stories of an all-encompassing African gods, the Orishas. And the reason I wouldn't say draw upon them, but they are to show that there's so much similarities between them, and also how they have been masked and hidden within Christianity for so long. And what's important is representation, to be included in this grander art canon, because that's where it's studied, that's where it is legitimized. So I started off as painting stories that were often similar to the famous paintings that we know and study throughout history. And I drew upon this to create some sort of connection and familiarity, no matter what cultural background you have. So then when you see these paintings, or let's say the Birth of Venus, which is I recreated as the Birth of Oshun, you can have this connection. Oh, I can relate to this. I've seen this. So learning about Yoruba culture doesn't seem so distant, because now it's like, okay, I see a familiarity. So this is not Venus, though. The Venus I know, she's Oshun. So you can say, oh, maybe she is the goddess of love. And so since you have that similarity, and Yoruba religion is entwined with a lot of similarities between Greek mythology and Christianity, that's how I displayed my work. And I found myself with each series explaining the stories. And by doing so, now currently that I'm diving deeper into the Yoruba religion and the stories that aren't so well known or could be comparable to Greek mythology or some of these famous, paintings, religious paintings, I found myself orally telling these stories to my audience, just like my ancestors. And I understood that I couldn't multiply myself and be there for everyone retelling these stories. So I thought, all right, one person had particularly asked, where's a book? Is there a book? No. There's no books that we can draw upon, like the Greek mythology, like Norse, like anything. We don't have anything because it's been oral. And for some reason, maybe because we're so used to hiding it and keeping it covered, that we don't have a linear epic that entwines our history like Ovid's Metamorphosis. So I took that structure of what Ovid did, where he entwined history with mythology, and I wrote an epic that has a lot of the tales, the Patakees, ancient stories of the Orishas, and entwine them in history that is not taught, that's not represented here. So hopefully, which is going to be released in fall 2025, that it can now become or enter into that grander art narrative and literature that we can draw upon.
That's wonderful. So you're going to fill that gap
Yeah, I hope
in my
so.
childhood.
Yeah.
I really look forward to the book. one of the things I think you've done in a lot of your works, and maybe particularly around a certain period, 2017, 2018, was to use biblical stories that were often recognizable representations in Western art that you adapted. And I've heard you talk about how you almost saw it as a way of smuggling in the Orishas, the deities of the Yoruba tradition, into maybe a kind of Western consciousness by disguising or masking them as the more familiar gods of Christianity. The image that came to my mind is a bit like the Trojan horse, getting in past the sentries of the gates and then bursting out after they were already kind of safely inside. So that the biblical stories were almost like the Trojan horse that were getting through the entry gate. Is that how you would describe what you were doing, or do you see it a bit differently from that?
A bit differently, because when I think about the Trojan horse story, it seemed peaceful, right? It was a present, and then all of a sudden you had this destruction and this. That's not what I'm trying to do. I'm not masking them under these Catholic saints. I'm unmasking them.
Yes.
So the images you see, it's just revealing.
Yes.
And if you think about my artwork and how throughout the years it's developed, I wanted, when I began my art career, I wanted to first explain who I was and introduce myself into the world. So how was I going to do this, and how was I going to explain such a complex topic that no one studied or understood? I couldn't just come right out the bat painting these orishas, because people won't relate. It'll be very niche. I'm trying to open them up to a broader audience so we can start again studying it in institutions. So these earlier paintings were they were about female empowerment, because during that time I was finding that empowerment without having a man there, but women can be strong, women can be seen as godly and powerful and in charge, and especially Black women who are not seen as godly. Because if we think in our society and why representation matters, why seeing these images matters, is that what we learn through school and institutions is about white gods and white heroes. And when we learn about them, and you don't see any Black gods and Black heroes, but when you see this, if you are not white, you're going to think yourself less than, that you cannot reach that high pinnacle of leadership, of dominance, of this amazing power. So it's important, very important, regardless of what religion you choose, to understand and study and know about these African gods that we accompanied us, that survived through our forced migration, because their roots go past enslavement. So by engaging with these narratives, by looking at these heroes and visually seeing them and reading about them, I believe that our Black youth can cultivate a better connection to our heritage, and therefore really influence future generations.
Just to pick up on that important point about this significance of women figures and Black women figures. I mean, one of the works of yours that we have in the visual commentary on Scripture, which one of our authors really wanted to include and write about, is called The Creation of God,
Yes.
which flips more than one thing, because it flips the male to the female, and it's the creation is kind of going sort of in both directions, possibly. I mean, it's not just God creating Adam, it's the creation of God, which reminds us maybe that some of our conceptions of God are of our own making. And that can be problematic sometimes, but we need to attend to what we project onto our gods. But it's based on Michelangelo's famous Sistine Chapel ceiling and the creation of Adam. And that's a great example, isn't it, of Black bodies where there have been white bodies and female bodies where there have been male bodies. What motivated you to make that particular work?
I wanted to push for people to question why. Why have we learned things for so long? Why do we have this vision of God a certain way? And it really whenever I try to combat some, what we're, whenever I look at contemporary society and how we still have racism and so forth, I don't think of a Band-Aid. So I think of where did it stem from? Where is the root from? And if you think about how religion was taught and to the enslaved, it was always preached with somebody white, and it was it was purposeful because
We're in a building with the oldest pulpit in continuous use in America. So anyway,
because then it's like visually seeing somebody white is like, oh, okay, well, we're supposed to obey them. Now, so you're going to imagine a white God, right? Especially with the images that were depicted and shown, a white God, right? Okay, and then also a wife or woman is supposed to obey their husband, right? So then you have this, we're learning on how to act and how to live within society. Okay, obey the white man and also obey your husband. And how was I going to combat this? Well, with one of the most famous paintings, in the world of the creation of Adam. It was perfect. It was, all right, I'm going to have a black woman as God, and yes, she's going to create Eve. So I did this out of pure love, but also for my empowerment, for my confidence myself. Like here I was now, I was freshly divorced and I was coming into like, okay, I'm taking care of my children, this, independence. And so I painted this to heal myself and heal all those misconceptions. And I did it out of pure love. And unfortunately, this pure love created controversy, created a disruption, and that only further propelled me to do what I do today.
right. So there were some negative reactions you had to... Yeah. A pairing of works that's very intriguing to me, that has this same quality of instantly recognizable biblical figures that are doing something more than you expect from the tradition, is a pair of paintings of Adam and Eve. And they're subtitled Strangler Fig. Why Adam and Eve, and what is the Strangler Fig, and why is it there?
When I create my works, I want it to be first beautiful. I don't want to draw or further divide the color line by creating us in chains or by having this white slave master or, so I had to figure out how I was going to do that. And in this particular painting, there's a strangler fig. And the strangler fig, I don't know if you know how it grows.
We don't have them in England. As far as I know, we don't have them in England.
It grows from the top down, and it needs a host tree in order to survive and flourish. A bird will eat its fruit, and then what happens is it flies, and of course it'll, poop on the branch. Expel on the branch. And then therefore the plant will grow and it'll start wrapping its vines around the host tree. And then once it does that, it kind of strangles it, right? And then it reaches the ground and the roots, and then it digs itself deep inside. And then it starts to take away from the tree's nourishment. And then once it does that, it kills that host tree. And once the tree is dead, then it will blossom these sweet, tasty figs for it to spread some more. So the strangler fig in my paintings are about manipulation and control, just as how we were manipulated and controlled, and that we needed to become that host in that sense. So then you see that, and then you also see a double-headed snake, and I did it on purpose. This double-headed snake represents the duality. We are making these decisions. We are making the decisions to either break from this traditional belief and understanding of us and how we are perceived, or falling into it. So you have this two choices that it has to start with us. And then therefore, that's why they're looking at each other. And that's why you see the fruit, because it's easier just to follow along with society and eat that fruit and just, or be awakened and go against the grain.
So you're using the language of biblical art to take people a little bit further, to take them on a journey with you, to think afresh about certain very contemporary questions. And that's very similar to what we aim to do in the visual commentary on Scripture, which is to take visual art and biblical texts and use them to catalyse contemporary questions. I'd like to pick up on something that you said earlier about not, wanting to show black bodies in chains. You paint bodies exquisitely and also honestly. And my sense as I look at them is that they're all the more exquisite because they're so honest. And by honest, I mean your attention to, you really feel you're in the presence of real people. There's the anatomical naturalism of it, the most extraordinary and beautiful skin. I mean, all of these things render a very vivid sense of human bodies being present through your painting. And it's interesting to me that at the same time you're showing sacred figures. So, there might be the Virgin Mary. One of my very favourite paintings of yours is of the Virgin. And you've done her more than once. One very simple one with bared breasts, nursing the infant, and another far more regal and dressed in very beautiful clothes. But in both cases, you don't feel you're just looking at a symbol or a mask or a paradigmatic figure. You feel you're looking at somebody fully incarnate, a real human. How difficult is it for you to hold together something that could be quite abstract, a mask, a deity, with something that's really very, very immediate and real and recognizable?
Because the difference is when you look at Christian work and iconology, then it's this one individual put up on a pedestal that we can never reach, we can never touch. It's this perfect person, idol. But in the Orishas and the African gods, they flow within us. They are connected to us. They are essentially us. We are all the chosen ones. So if you think about it in that way, like we can create the change, it's up to us, then these figures have flaws, because just like the deities, they have flaws. It's part of being human. And that's what I'm painting. It's not just, it's looking at this person and seeing yourself, a reflection of yourself being seen, not pristine, not in perfect muscular form or whatever society thinks that they think is perfect. You're seeing yourself, you're relating to it. You're like, it's empowering.
And I hear in the way you speak about that, and I also having heard you talking about this before, that you have almost a protective love of these orishas. That you speak about them with a sort of protective care. They made the crossing across the Atlantic with the people whose gods they were, and in a way, the people looked after the gods as well as the other way around. There was that mutual care. Yes. Is that true? Have I heard you right?
Yes, we needed each other to survive.
Yeah.
They needed us, we needed them.
So one of the ways the Orishas survived when they made this terrible crossing, and when they got there, in a predominantly Christian context, was in disguise, and they looked like saints. They were dressed up to look like saints, and so on. And I should just note for our viewers that there's some industrial action going on at a building across the street from here. And so the long history of this as a site of contestation continues. We're at the heart of the ongoing struggle for, in this case, claims for justice and freedom. So it's a living history, and we're hearing it right now. So we'll embrace that and carry on with our interview. I have a question about syncretism. So that's to say that the sort of diffusing of religious traditions. Is there something positive that you see, that you're making a kind of meeting point, a point of connection across religious differences?
When you unmask something, it's not going to be instant. So you still have, like myself, people, individuals, adults that still hold on to certain ways of thinking, just out of habit. And even when you are now discovering these African gods, and let's say you want to follow that, religion now, there's still connection to Christianity and the morality of it that you still respect and of course you still uphold. And so how do we merge these two together in a way where it can flow, they can meet in the middle? So I still use these images to slowly help that transition of people who are so, who have forgotten who's behind these saints that we brought, that's in our ancestry, that's in our heritage.
So as we look forward to the work that's coming down the track towards us, we can expect to see you opening the door, like the cage door, opening the door to more an enriching encounter with more of these traditions
And original compositions.
Yeah.
So like, again, I can't just do that because I want, again, the gods to be mainstreamed.
Right.
I want them to be understood and accepted. So I have to continue it. This is the only way that I know how to visually explain this. Hopefully the book will help have people understand it more, where now I can kind of move away and really dive deeper into the histories and everything, where it can be more understandable.
Well, I think the spirit of not kind of seeing this as a battle between the gods, but actually a form of enlarging our imaginations and amplifying the sort of repertoire we have in terms of our art and our religious traditions is making a huge contribution to both art history and to people's explorations in faith. We've always said that these conversations should not just be about the Bible's importance to Christians or Jews, but the Bible's importance to those of other traditions as something to bounce off, to use, sometimes to object to. And you're a wonderful example of how to do that in a way that's constantly creative and generous. So we're very grateful for that. We really look forward to your contribution to this place. And it's the freedom that it wants to be part of. It's here on the Freedom Trail. You'll be adding something new to that Freedom Trail, and to all that you have ahead of you. So thank you for spending time with us.
Thank you.